Welcome back, folks. We're getting into rarefied air here in the top 20 of my favorite board games of all time. Number 20 is a game that used to be number 1 on my list, actually, and it's slowly been sort of dropping a little bit, and part of that is just because I've played it so much, I feel like I've kind of played it out, and that game is Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders is a card drafting game where I get dealt a certain number of cards. I pick one and pass them to my neighbor. If you haven't seen so far on the list, you'll see even more of these. Card drafting and worker placement are probably my two favorite mechanisms in games. But Seven Wonders is really cool. You can build up your civilization and you each get a different wonder of the ancient world that sort of characterizes you. And some of you may have a militaristic society. You may have a society that's really good at science or different. So it's custom. Sort of each player has their own board, which is pretty cool. Now, this is another game that we played wrong for quite a while. And so just in the last year or two, my son Kyle was playing it online. I think it was on Board Game Arena. And he realized, oh man, we've been playing this game wrong. So he let us know. And so we started playing it right, which has changed the game a little bit for me. We have the cities expansion for this game, which adds like spies and corruption to it, which I think makes the game way better because it adds an extra layer of decision making and decision options for you. The trouble is, a lot of times I'm teaching this to new people. I don't include that expansion because it's just a little bit layer of additional complexity that I don't want to have to deal with when I'm first trying to teach people to play this game. This is a big player count game. I think it's better with 5 or 6 players, and it doesn't add a lot of time to the game because everybody's going simultaneously. We're all deciding at the same time, looking at our cards, which one are we keeping and which one are we passing. So adding additional players to the game doesn't necessarily add time, which is great because there aren't that many games that do that. And it's a great feature of card drafting, something that I really like. As I mentioned in my last video when I talked about Citadels, this is another game where if everybody's paying attention to the game, and the game can go quick and it's snappy and that's great. But this is another game that is in danger of grinding to a halt if you have one person who's really struggling to make decisions or they're on their phones and not paying attention or whatever. So I like to try to encourage everybody, like, let's play, let's stay tuned into the game. But the theme is really cool. There's lots of decisions. There's different avenues that you could take to try to score points. And so Seven Wonders is a long-time hit for our family. The next game on my list I picked up at a board game convention a few years ago, and it was an instant hit. Me and my brother played it, and I brought it home, and Virginia loved it. This game's called Barenpark. And in Barenpark, it's a polyomino game, meaning you have these different sort of Tetris type pieces, and you're trying to fit them into your board, which is a zoo. It's a bear zoo, a bear park. And we're each building our own zoo, trying to fit these different bear enclosures into our zoo. And you're trying to build out your zoo with pieces that are going to score you the most points, and you're trying to fill up your zoo because then you get to add these little statues that are worth points. And there are some objectives that you could try to hit that give you some additional points. And so it's a pretty relaxing game. It's not very complex, easy to learn. It's pretty game. It's really good. It works, scales well with 2, 3, 4 players. So it's got a lot of flexibility, adaptability, and it can be played with a lot of different people. So Barenpark is a really solid game. All right, number 18 on my list is one of the heaviest games on my list, and this one I think is slowly going to start creeping back up the list. It dropped for a while because it's just hard to get to the table because it's a complex, difficult game. But me and my brothers love this game, and it's sort of the nostalgia factor for me is making some of these older, more complicated games rise back up to the top. because at Sidetracks, I tend to teach a lot of new games. We have a lot of people who aren't into games, and so I tend to teach a lot of light and easy stuff. But it makes me sort of pine for some of these bigger, heavier, deeper games that I haven't got to play in a long time. And so that nostalgia factor is starting to ratchet up. And this game, I don't know if I even mentioned it, this game is Power Grid. And Power Grid is a game where the trick to this whole game, and I guess I probably shouldn't even be the one giving advice on it because I don't win very often. But the trick to this game, as I see it, is there are kind of 3 different elements to the game. You're trying to build a grid of houses, a power grid of different buildings on the board. So there's an area control aspect of it. And you're trying to balance that with having the power plants that you need. There's a power plant market where you're buying power plants to feed that power grid, okay? And building houses costs you money, and buying power plants costs you money, and upgrading power plants costs you money. So there's a balancing act there. Well, the other third leg of that stool is each of those power plants is powered by a different type of fuel. And it might be coal or oil or uranium or garbage, or you might have green power plants that are like solar. You don't need to buy any extra resources. But there's a resource market, and it's actually my favorite part of the game, where you buy up these resources that you need to fuel the power plants to feed the electric grid, okay? And the cool part about it, there's a mechanism in the game where whoever's in last place gets a priority to buy off of this market first. And so it's a catch-up mechanism. So nobody can usually get too far ahead in this game. But I can buy up a whole bunch of resources on this resource market, which makes it much more expensive for my opponent, who's in the lead, to buy up those same resources. And so it's a constant balance between expanding your power grid, upgrading your coal or oil-fired power plants to more efficient ones, and then buying resources on the resource market. And whoever can perfect that balance the most is going to probably be the winner. And I'm not very good at this game, but it's a fantastic game, and it's a really great mental challenge. So I love Power Grid. Number 17 on my list is a game that sort of fits in just a perfect niche. It's not a light game like Ticket to Ride or Sushi Go or something super simple, but it's not a heavy game like Power Grid either. It's not that complicated. And this game is called Concordia. In Concordia, you are traders in the Mediterranean, and you're building out this network of settlements that'll produce different types of goods like iron and silk and brick, and then you're using those goods to purchase certain things. But the cool thing about Concordia is the card mechanism in it, because this is what's called a deck builder, or part of the game is a deck builder. It's not a pure deck builder, but you get a certain number of cards to work with at the beginning of the game, and those cards allow you to take certain actions. But you can buy additional cards to add to your deck, which will give you additional actions. The cool part about this game is the cards serve 2 purposes. Each card allows you to take a certain action, but at the bottom of the card there's also a Greek or Roman god listed that's going to determine how you score points at the end of the game. And so that's really cool, because when you're buying those cards, you're thinking about, what do I need that card for now? But then also, how do I make my long-term strategy fit so that I'll score points at the end of the game? And some of those cards are going to give you points based on, they want you to create a monopoly of certain goods. Other ones want you to spread out around the board and create as many settlements everywhere as you possibly can. Other ones want you to get really good at colonizing and creating lots of dudes, okay, to put on the map. And so there's lots of really cool decisions and lots of different ways to tailor your strategy in this game. And so it's fantastic. It's that perfect spot in sort of the middle between a beginner game and a heavy game that just fits that sweet spot. And that's Concordia. Number 16 is a game that has risen 11 spots this year, and it's an awesome card game called Biblios. And this game's risen quite a bit because I had a chance to teach it to my buddy Ken when he came up for Veterans Night at the shop. And we had such a great time playing this game because it's got a really cool card drafting mechanism in it. Most card drafting games, you get dealt a hand of cards, you pick one and you pass them, and you pick another one and then you pass them. This game's completely different in the way you get your cards. If it's my turn, I'm going to look at the top card of the deck, and I have a choice. Do I keep it for myself, or do I let one of my opponents have it, or do I set it off to the side in a hidden pile that will auction off later on in the game? And so I make my decision, and then I look at the second card. And if I hadn't taken the first one, I can either take this one or I can put it out there for other people. And so you're going to do that. Let's say we have 4 players. I'm going to get to look at 4 different cards. One of them I keep, one of them I auction for later, and 2 of them I throw out on the table, and my opponents are going to get a chance to look at those. Okay? And so it's really cool because you have that constant tension of looking at a card going, oh man, this is a pretty good card. But is it good enough? Is it the best card I'm going to get out of these next draws, right? And if I keep that first one, that means I don't know what's coming next. I may be giving my opponent some really good cards. Or maybe I look at it and go, it's not that great, right? And I throw it out there. I let my opponents have that one. And I take my shot and take a chance at that the last card I pick is going to be the one that I really want. And I pick up that last card, and it could be fantastic, or it could be a terrible card, right? And so you're taking that risk. And what you're trying to do in this game, the game theme is weak. It's basically like medieval monks and you're creating books or something. There's not much of a theme to it. It's really just different colors and numbers. It's sort of like I mentioned in Lost Cities in my other video. But what you're trying to do is whoever has the most of each color, so the most brown, the most blue, the most red, is gonna get a certain number of victory points. And so it doesn't do you any good to come in second or third in that particular color. So constantly during the game, I'm trying to figure out, is this guy going for orange or not? Do I have a shot at winning orange, or should I ditch? There's a way to ditch cards when you're doing the auction. Like maybe I should just throw away all my orange because I know I don't have a chance of winning those victory points anyway. And so it's really simple card game, but really cool decision space. And it's a great game to teach to new people, to open up their eyes, be like, whoa, I've never played anything like this before. This is great. That's Biblios. Number 15 on my list is my favorite of the 3 trekking games, and that's Trekking the World. Trekking the World is very similar to Trekking the National Parks in that you're traveling around the board, you're collecting up different souvenirs, you're visiting different places. In this case, not national parks, but you're visiting UNESCO World Heritage Sites, which is cool. The artwork is gorgeous in this game. But the one major rule change compared to Trekking the National Parks, in that game, you could go to a place like the Grand Canyon, and you could just sit there and wait until you draw the cards that you need to be able to claim that park and visit the Grand Canyon. And you could just basically park there and block it from everybody else. In Trekking the World, they changed one little rule that completely changes the whole game. And that is, you have to move first at the beginning of your turn. So you can't just sit at a place and park there until you pull the cards you need. You have to move around the board, and you have to plan ahead and think, okay, I need to time this so that I end up there when I have the cards that I need. And so it's just a little twist that makes the game much more interesting, a little more thinky, but much more interesting to me. And so I vastly prefer Trekking the World over Trekking the National Parks, even though if it's a new person who's never played any of them, I usually play Trekking the National Parks first because it's simpler. But for me, as somebody who enjoys the games and knows them, I want to play Trekking the World if I have a choice. All right, number 14 on my list is another one of those heavy games that is slowly starting to rise back up. At one time, this would have been in my top 3 or 4, but it has slowly dropped off the list or dropped down on the list just because it's so hard to get to the table. I don't think I've played this game in 2 or 3 years. Just because it's a 5 or 6 hour game. You got to make a major time commitment to play. But 1830, the game of railroads and robber barons, is the game that really opened my eyes and my brother's eyes as to what games could be. When we played this game for the first time, I bought this game at Altoona Curve in the gift shop years ago, decades ago at this point. And when we first played this game, I was just blown away. I'm like, whoa, I did not know games could be that cool. This game has a map where you are building out different railroad networks, and there's an operational phase where you run those trains on the networks you're building. But then there's also a stock market phase of the game. And that's the coolest part of this game, because you're buying and selling, controlling interest in these different railroad companies. And so I may be the president of B&O Railroad for now. So I'm the guy making the decisions on where to lay the track and where the trains are going to run. But you know what? Maybe I don't want to be in charge of B&O anymore. Maybe I don't see a strong future, and I'm going to sell all the good stuff out of this company, and I'm going to sell my stock and stick somebody else being the majority shareholder and having to run this dog of a company. And so one of the greatest parts about this game is screwing your other opponents by, basically sucking all the wealth out of a particular company and then getting out from under it and then stick them with it. And so this game is fantastic. It's a hard game to get to the table. You got to have a major commitment to play it. But one of the things that I super appreciate about this game is, even though it's heavy, compared to a lot of other heavy games, I mean, it's long, but it's really not that heavy. There aren't that many rules. And so it's not that difficult a game to learn and to wrap your head around. There's so many other heavy games that I've played that have all these fiddly rules and 50 pages of a rule book, and it's just hard to understand what's going on. This game is fairly simple in its mechanics. And so it's not that hard. It just takes some time and a commitment to play it. But 1830 will always be one of our favorite games in our house. All right, number 13 on my list is my favorite cooperative game. This is number 1. I mentioned before Pandemic and Castle Panic and Forbidden Island. Those are all great co-op games. But Horrified is my favorite co-op game. Horrified, you are heroes trying to protect your village from different movie monsters. So you have Dracula and the Mummy and the werewolf and the creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein. And the cool thing in this game is you can pick different combinations of who you want to go up against each game. And each monster has a little bit different difficulty level. And the coolest part is each monster has a different way that you have to approach them and attack them in order to knock them out of the game. You have villagers that will pop up around the board from time to time, and one of the things you have to do is pick those villagers up and deliver them to a different part of the board to get them to safety. And if the monsters get your villagers, that's going to knock you up on the terror track. And if the terror track gets to a certain point, they've terrorized your city and you lose. There's also a time element. There's a deck of cards where each turn you get to move as a hero, and then the monsters move and attack. And then the next player does their turn, and then the monsters move and attack. If that monster movement deck runs out, essentially you've run out of time, and they've terrorized your city that way. So like many other co-op games, there's lots of ways to lose, and there's only one way to win. This game is really great. It's not that hard to learn, so I teach it to kids and adults. But Horrified is a fantastic game if you're interested in getting into co-ops. There are a couple other versions of this game. I have the basic version with the classic Universal movie monsters. There's also a version with what they call American monsters, which has like the Jersey Devil and the Mothman and other ones. My brother has that game. he said it's pretty much the same game, so I didn't end up getting both of them. But there's a newer version out as well with like Greek mythological characters, and that one looks really cool. So at some point I may pick that one up, because Horrified's definitely a great co-op game. All right, number 12 on my list is probably the game with the least amount of rules. Or maybe I should say least amount of rule, because there's really only one rule, and that is you have to put your pieces corner to corner. This game is called Blokus, and this game you have Tetris type pieces, and that's the only rule. You start in the corner on your board, and your opponent starts in their corner, and the other opponent start in their corner, and you're putting your Tetris pieces out. The only rule is they got to go corner to corner. They can't match up side by side or orthogonally. They just have to go connect corners. And so you're hopping over different other people to try to get all your pieces out on the board, and whoever uses up the most pieces wins. Super simple, but super fun as well. Grady's really great at this game. He usually kicks my butt at it, but I hold my own from time to time. The only downside to this game, there are ways to play it with 2 or 3 players, but I will only play this game at 4. It really shines at 4 players because there's 4 corners of the board. Everybody's doing their own thing. You don't have to worry about a dummy player or trying to play 2 different colors or something like that. So my suggestion, if you're playing this, play it at 4. It's great. But I had a family from the Shannock come into the shop a couple months ago, and they told me that they like chess. And so I was like, oh, 4. There were 3 boys and their mom. I taught this game to them, and they loved it. And they immediately dumped it after the first play. They dumped it and played it again. And I was like, yeah, this really is a great game. So if you're looking for a cool family game, you got 4 people in your household, Blokus would probably be my biggest recommendation. Give it a shot. The last game on this list is holding strong at number 11, and that's Discoveries: The Journals of Lewis and Clark. For some reason, I can't seem to find many people who love this game as much as I do, but I think this game is awesome. It's a dice drafting game, so you roll dice and then you're going to use those dice to do different actions. And what you're doing on this game is you are part of the Lewis and Clark expedition, and you are traveling over mountains and through rivers to try to explore different areas in the West. And so you can gain points by completing certain expeditions. You can also gain points by discovering new animals. And one of my favorite things about this game is just the beautiful artwork. I think it's the prettiest game we have. And on one side of each card, you either have paintings of animals or those mountains and rivers. And then on the opposite side, my favorite, is the Native American tribes, because they're just beautifully illustrated, and each tribe can help you along the way on your expedition. So you can recruit those different tribes, and some of them are friendly and some of them are wary of Europeans, and so you can recruit them to help you though, and they'll help you along your expeditions. The cool part about this game, I think thematically, is that you don't actually complete an expedition until you journal it, because the whole point, is Lewis and Clark needed to journal all this stuff and get it back to the East so that people could understand what they found and understand these discoveries. And so I love this game. It's a little bit hard to teach. There's a few quirky things about it that makes it a little tough at the beginning when you're first learning it. But once you learn this game, the turns can go really fast, because you're just playing one type of dice, and then it's the other person's turn, and then it's the other, and you just go real quick. And so it's a really cool game, one of my favorites, and one that I'm just hoping I can find a few other people that like it as much as me, so we can get it to the table a little more often. All right, so that's it for number 11 through 20. The next list is going to be the top 10, my 10 favorite games of all time. And spoiler alert, there's some pretty big changes since the last one, so you'll definitely want to tune in and check out the top 10 list. See you there.